Hello, this is David Heising, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a coffee mug. So to get started, I've already Googled coffee mugs to get some good reference. And scrolling down here, I really decided that I like this one, just because it's not the standard square-ish coffee mug. It's basically just a cylinder and really simple. I'm going to do a tapered one, and I like the color too. So I've already gone ahead and saved this out to my desktop so I can grab it and put it inside 3ds Max. And I also got this because it has a nice side view, so I can put this in my Max viewport and model it that way as a good template. So let's hop into Max. I'm going to first make a plane. The shot of my mug was from my left view, so I'm going to go on my left viewport and drag out a plane. And it doesn't matter which size, it can be whatever size you want. So now I'm ready to apply my coffee mug image to our plane. So I'm going to hit M on my keyboard. That's for the material editor. I'm going to go to my diffuse slot, click the little button next to it, and up here under maps, I'm going to go down and select bitmap. And now it's going to ask where do I search for, so I'm going to go to my coffee mug image, open it, and now we have our coffee mug material loaded in. Hopefully your material ball changes color. So now I'm going to apply it. Either I can drag and drop it on, or I can select my plane and hit this button to assign it. And now you notice that it's not showing up in our viewport, and that's because we haven't hit this button, and this will show our bitmap in our scene. So now we can close our material editor, and I'm going to full screen this so you can see better. So now we have our reference set up and applied, but you'll notice that it's stretched. Your coffee mug is probably either wide or too small, or maybe you don't even notice. But we want to get the best reference possible, so we're going to go to our Modify tab and go to our modifier list. Once in here, we're going to go down to UVW map and apply it, and nothing has changed quite yet, and we need to tell we need to tell Max how big our bitmap is. So if you scroll down under UVW map, you'll see the bitmap fit option. We're going to click that and then open the reference that we used. So Max knows to make it exactly that big. And you might notice some tiling on your plane, and that's fine. The important thing is we now have a correctly scaled version of our mug to model from. So now that we got that set up, I think we're ready to begin modeling. So to break this down, I see a cylinder when we look at this with a handle coming out of it. So we're going to start with the base of the mug first. So that looks like a cylinder to me. So I'm going to start with a cylinder. I'm going to drag it in my view. That doesn't matter which size quite yet. I'm just going to roughly get my cylinder in there. And now I want to be modeling in my left view. So I can either work in my other viewports in here, or I like to work in one viewport and I'm going to hit L on my keyboard to make it my left view. And now I'm going to drag it down until it reaches the base. And obviously this is way too short, so we're going to change the size of our cylinder. So we're going to go to the Modify panel with our cylinder selected, and now we're going to increase the height until it reaches the top. That looks good to me. And now we're going to, well, one of the things that we always want to do when we're modeling is we want to work with as few segments as possible and as few polygons as possible at the start, and then work our way up. We never want to do too much work inside of 3ds Max. We want the program to do the work for us. So I'm going to change this to 3. I think that'll give me enough control over the shape of my cylinder in order to make a nice mug. So now that I got our base parameters set, I'm going to right click our cylinder, convert to edit poly. Now we're ready to start lining things up. And right now I can't see our mug behind our cylinder. So I'm going to hold Alt and then press X so I can see through my cylinder. And Max is terrible and likes to start with the realistic. You get a lot of that gross, noisy shadow behind there. So let's change that. We're going to go up to here, then select shaded. Now we can see behind our cylinder. And I also like to work with this grid off because it's kind of throwing me off right now. So I'm going to hit G on my keyboard and then that goes away. So keep in mind I'm in my left view and I'm going to start aligning things up now. So going to my vertex mode, I'm going to select all the top because that looks the most off right now. And then I can hit the scale button on my keyboard or hit R. Now I can begin scaling things up. And make sure when you're working, you always select the middle triangle and not this outer one. Because this one will scale all of them, and then this one will only scale in the Y and X axis. And we don't want that. We want uniform scaling. So now working our way down, I'm going to select all these now and scale until they roughly reach the sides. And don't worry about being too exact because the final product is a lot more important than um, getting every small vertex lined up. So that looks like a good start. Excellent. So now I'm going to teach you about the spline tool. And the splines are located under our Create tab. They're used to working under geometry, but this one we want shapes. And grabbing our line tool, we can begin drawing our handle. And if you're not familiar with splines, a spline tool is basically a 3D pen tool. So going over here, I'm going to get my pen tool out. So that means I can either click once and drag shapes like this, or I can drag nice curved lines. Obviously my final product isn't correct, I don't have the right settings, but hopping back into 3ds Max, I have my line tool selected and I'm ready to draw the rough shape of my handle. So with 3D splines or lines, you can basically tell it whatever shape you want it to be. So I could make it a cylinder, I could have it so many segments in my cylinder, I could make it a rectangle, which is what we're going to be doing. So right now, I'm not going to trace the inner and outer, I'm going to trace the middle of it. So I can make it a rectangle and then it'll be lined up with the outer and inner sides. So later I'm going to be bridging our our 3ds Max base with our handle. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to leave some space between there. So I'm just going to drag out the rough shape of my handle here. That looks good to me. I've left space in between here and here. So going into my modify panel, we're going to give it 3D qualities. And to do that, I'm going to open our rendering tab under our line tool, then enable in renderer and enable in viewport. Now you've probably seen something change on your screen. So going down, we want to adjust this. We don't want a radial spline, we want a rectangular one. And you can see that that has now become rectangular in 3D space. So now I'm going to increase the size and dimensions of my spline. That looks about right. And for our width, it seems to be a little bit thin. So I'm going to thicken that up. That looks about right. And your handle might be different than mine, and that's okay. So I can see that this isn't quite lined up the way I want it to. So now, just like under an edit poly option, I also have the option to come in to my spline and edit the vertices. So under our selection tab, I'm going to hit vertex. Now I can come in and adjust our splines and move them around, tweak them. And if you can't see where the points are, you can go over here and select wireframe, or that's F3 on your keyboard. So I'm going to go in and move this around. I don't know why it went back to realistic, so we're going to go with shaded. I can hit Alt X as well for my handle, so I can see through that. So I'm just going to go through very methodically and line these up. I can scale them, so I can increase the curve, or if you went around and just didn't even have any Bezier curves, that's fine with me. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to exit out of our vertice mode by clicking that off. And now we are ready to connect these two segments and attach them. So to do that, I'm going to select my coffee mug base and make sure you're not in the option of any of these. We're going to go to our attach tool, and once we have that pressed, we're going to attach our spline. And that happens quite a bit. Splines are really finicky with the way they select. So if you can't manage to select it through your viewport, you're having a hard time clicking it, we can go over here to attach list. And that will list all the things in our scene. So we want our line to attach. So I'm going to select that. And now this is all one object. So when I deselect it, both of these aren't selected. And when I select my base, the line is also selected. So now our goal is to suture up the coffee mug handle and the coffee mug base, because right now they're two separate objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add more supporting segments so I can attach my coffee mug handle. And I'm going to do that by lining up or creating a segment up for the top and also for the bottom, because we're working with uh, rectangles, and those have four sides. So we need a four-sided base on our coffee mug for our line to hook up to. Think of a hose connecting to another hose, and you need the exact, roughly the same size in order to get it to work. So to do that, I have my object selected. I'm going to go into edge mode. And now I can either select all the vertical segments of my coffee mug by dragging and selecting, or I can select one of these and tell 3ds Max to ring it, and that will select all of them for me. So now that I have those selected, I'm going to go up into settings right next to connect. And now it will preview the segment that you're going to be connecting. And if you click off of it, it doesn't know what to connect it in between. Like this line that it creates isn't real yet because you haven't hit the OK button. So now we're going to adjust where it is, and we're just lining it up with the top, and then we're going to make another one for the bottom. So this one looks roughly lined up with the top, and it doesn't have to be exact. So now I'm going to hit the OK button. And now this is a real line, so I can drag it and move it up and down. So I'm going to undo that. Now I'm going to do the same thing with these segments. So selecting one, I'm going to hit ring. And going up, I'm going to hit the box next to connect. Now I can move that up roughly to the bottom. And that looks okay to me. Now I'm going to do that with the bottom. So selecting one, ring, connect. That looks pretty good already. Now, because this has a rounded tapered edge, I'm going to actually scale this. Your coffee mug might not need it, but I'm going to do that ahead of time. And now I'm going to hit ring again for these segments, going into connect. That also looks good. And I'm just going to scale it to give it that rounded coffee mug feel. So now we have prepared a landing zone for our spline to attach to our coffee mug base. So now we need to delete or make an opening for it. So I can't quite see all that's going on in my mug. So I'm going to hit Alt X to make it non-transparent. Then I'm going to isolate it so I don't have the plane in the background. So I'm going to right click my coffee mug base. Then we're going to go to Isolate Selection. And a shortcut for that is Alt Q. And then whenever you want to leave your isolated selection, you're just going to hit this and you'll get everything back. So once again, I'm going to right click, go into Isolate Selection. So it's only showing my object. And then under Edit Poly, I'm going to go into my polygon mode and select the polygon where it's going to attach to. Delete it. And also for the bottom, and then delete that. Now we also have polygons on our spline. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to leave these because I want to show you what happens when you try and bridge something when there's polygons onto it. So going into my edge mode of my edit poly, I can begin bridging these. So we're going to teach you the bridge tool. So select the two lines that you want to bridge between. So I want to bridge these two. So over here, right next to connect, there is a bridge tool. So I'm just going to click that, not the box next to it, the actual bridge button. And that has bridged and made a polygon between my two segments. So once again, methodically, we're going to go around all four sides of our coffee mug handle and bridge them. Excellent. Now we have a completed uh, unit here. So the coffee mug handle is now part of the base. So going down here, if you didn't delete the polygons and you try and bridge them, it's not going to work. And 3ds Max is kind of weird when it draws splines. And on the bottom of your handle, you're going to have two polygons. So remember, if one side isn't bridging, it's probably because you have two polygons and you forgot to delete one. So deleting those both, I'm going to go into my edge mode again. And I still have those selected. I'm going to hit the bridge tool. I'm just going to go around and do this for the rest of the mug. Excellent. Now we have a completed handle. And then I won't do it now, but I expect you guys to go in and fine tune and just make this a better connection by going in and adjusting a few points. Like that. That looks pretty good. And now you can't drink out of it, so we're still in edit poly. I'm going to go to my polygon mode and then delete the top of my mug so now I can see in it. So you notice that we have a very thin, um, there's no depth to our mug because there's only one polygon. When you render it, it's only going to show this side and you're going to be able to see through your mug, and we don't want that, obviously. So to fix that, we're going to go into our edit poly, or a modifier list, excuse me. We're going to scroll down until we find shell. And then shell adds thickness to your mug. So I was quite happy with the outside amount of my mug because we lined it up to the outside of it. So I'm going to lower that to 0. Now just clicking and dragging, I'm going to add depth to the inside of my mug. And that looks okay. So I think that's my finished product for my mug. Looks pretty decently realistic, a little bit blocky, but you can always add a turbo smooth to it. And you can always go in and fix the bottom, but that's how you make a mug. So the other way I'm going to teach you is using splines, making a coffee mug out of splines. So I'm going to either hide my mug or delete it. So I'm going to hide that, and remember we're in isolation mode, so we're going to end isolation to get our reference back. So now if we want to make this out of splines, I'm going to go back to my create panel, go back to my line tool. Now because 3ds Max remembers the settings that we drew our handle with, it will remember that we want it to enable in render and enable in viewport. So if I draw now, it's going to be all blocky and chunky, like this, because it still has all the settings. So I'm going to exit out of that, delete it. I'm going to tick these off so I can see through my line. So in the future, I'm going to be using the lathe modifier to spin my spline around and make physical geometry for my mug. And that works. Think of a pot maker when they have the spinning circle that they're working the clay with. That's basically how the lathe tool works. So I'm going to imagine there's a center point to my mug. So I'm going to begin at the bottom, around the center, and then start to trace the outline of my shape like this. Then I'm going to hit escape to cancel my drawing mode. And now, like I was mentioning earlier, we're going to head over to our modify tab with our line selected. Going in our modifier list, we're going to scroll down until we find lathe. Now it has made 3D geometry with our line. So obviously this isn't looking correct yet because it's spinning around the pivot point of our object. So to fix this, we're going to open up our lathe tool, expand where we want it to rotate around, then select our axis. Now, if we have move selected, we can begin to drag this in our center. And remember, it's rotating around this very center point. So we want it to center in the center of our mug. Makes sense, right? So now that looks pretty good to me. So we're going to cancel out of this. And like before, we're ready to draw the handle of our mug. So it's the same process as before. I'm making sure I'm in my left view. Going over to create, making sure our shapes is selected, and going to our line tool. I'm going a little bit faster, but now I can start to draw things out. And this time, I'm just not going to click and drag. I'm going to make points. And remembering to leave space in between my mug and my handle. I'm going to hit escape to cancel our drawing mode. Going into modify, we need to give it depth again. Enable and render, enable and viewport. It already has rectangular selected. We don't want radial. Here's rectangular. And I'll make this one a little bit thicker. That looks okay. Now, you're used to doing this. We can go to our mug base, convert to edit poly, and now our spline has become an edit poly. So now going in, I can begin making a landing pad for my mug, but I'm going to attach it first. And once again, I'm going to go into my attach list, find my line, attach it, and I'm going to isolate it because I can't quite see what's going on. So right click, isolate selection. There we go. And now, looking straight on, I can see that my mug handle isn't going to have, it's right between two polygons that I want to attach it to. So I'm going to fix this by going into my polygon mode, then going in and selecting the polygons that I want to rotate and fix. Or because these are two separate objects and they're not combined yet, I can select my element mode and click the object that I want to rotate. So I want to rotate my mug. I'm just going to rotate it until I get a nice opening so I can suture these up. So that looks alright to me. And then if you don't have a good place to make a hole for your handle, you can tweak the segments in here by either, like we did with our first mug, going in and ringing it and then connecting it. Or for this one, I feel like I have enough polygons ready, so I'm just going to move this one up a little bit. And I add another segment down here, so selecting that, hitting ring, going to connect, and I'm just going to lower that. Instead of going in and clicking very slowly, I'm just holding my mouse button down and dragging it up and down. So that looks good. I'm going to tweak this one a little bit. I'm not quite happy with that. And a lot of working in Max is just fine-tuning things. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Now remember, these are one object, so I can go in and delete polygons to where I want to bridge these. So deleting the two down here and the one up here. Now I can bridge them. And when I taught this lesson in class, I noticed that a lot of students were having problems connecting their lathed mug with their handle. And that's because the polygons were all flipped. So if I go in my element mode, select this, and flip them, I'll show you what I mean by that. So when I bridged these, or when they bridged those, they flipped like this. And that's because our polygons are flipped, and Max doesn't know what to do, so they're trying to line the face up with this, with the face of this, which is facing this direction. And you can tell by selecting one of the polygons on what you think are flipped, we want it to be a light red instead of a dark red, because this one's light red, so that means it's facing out, so it's looking towards the camera, and this one's looking away from the camera. So I'm going to delete this abomination, go in and hit our element tool, select it. Now we can flip it, flip all the polygons at once, so they're all facing out now. So now I can sew these back up. So going into my edge mode, I'm selecting the two that I want to bridge between, and just going around and making it one element. And it looks like I got a little bit too close with my segment here, and there's a little bit of pinching going on. So hitting L on my keyboard for left view, I'm going to go in, and then I'm going to select these two vertices. I see a lot of students just clicking one vertice and then moving it, but remember we're working in 3D and it's not selecting the point behind it. So I'm going to undo that, select both of these, and I can move them back so there's a little bit less pinching, and there's a very definitive curve to my handle. And that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to click off my vertices and then go over to polygon mode. Oh yeah, I already made the I already deleted the top. Go me. So now I need to fix our bottom here, because when I made my spline it wasn't exactly in the center. So now I can do that by selecting our border mode, then selecting what we want to cap. So I want to cap this, so I can select that. I can hit my cap button. Or what I can do, I'm just going to undo that. That's a good option. Or I can select all these vertices here. If I want to make them and weld them into one vertice, I can go in to my weld tool, hit the settings box, and scale my threshold until I see one vertice in my viewport. And now we're going to give it some depth to our mug. So going in with our mug selected to our modifiers, we're going to scroll down until we find the shell modifier. And now we have our mug. So I'm going to move this over and unhide our first mug. And there you have it. Those are our two mugs. And I see right now that this one's kind of funky looking. It's a little bit more jagged than this one. And that's because of smoothing groups. So you don't have to do this, but I think I will, just because I can be a little bit perfectionistic. I'm going to turn off my shell, go into my edit poly, go into my polygon mode, and select all my polygons. Then I'm going to hit clear all under my polygon smoothing groups, auto smooth. Now what 3ds Max has gone in and done is smoothed all my polygons. So getting out of my polygon selection mode and clicking on shell again, I can see that my mug is nice and smooth like my other one. So hopefully this has been useful for you. Feel free to ask me any questions, whether you're in my class or not. Feel free to email me or yeah, ask me in person. Thanks for watching.